What is up, everybody? My name is Asgeir Pyrazire, and welcome to the very first episode of the DM Dumpstat, a show hosted by myself or Logical Yew, where we dump the knowledge that we have gained through our time DMing onto all y'all. Today's dump is going to be about everyone's favorite topic, economics in Dungeons & Dragons. Okay, let's be real. While maybe one or two of y'all out there are really passionate about this topic, odds are good most of y'all don't really get excited about D&D economics. Which is probably why, when you look elsewhere on YouTube, it's not a topic you see discussed in depth very often. It is, however, a very important topic and one which lies central to motivating your players, because the core of economics in D&D is gold. And everyone loves finding a massive chest bursting at the seams with gold in a dungeon, or getting handed a fat sack of it for rescuing some noble's cat. Now, while it is a relatively sparse topic on YouTube, it is a topic which is hotly debated on other corners of the internet. From low gold settings to high gold, from historical accuracy to modern pricing, it can get really confusing. Even I make mistakes from time to time.
I think the average peasant earns about a gold a year.
Fortunately, WotC has made the life of dungeon masters like me much easier by publishing charts and tables in their books to simply tell us how much things cost. From the armor tables on page 145 of the Player's Handbook, to the numerous charts for goods that you can find on page 157. The vast majority of things that players could be expected to seek out and purchase already have price tags. Hell, there are even tables in the DMG for how much it costs to build a castle or a city. But despite the fact that the DMG and the Player's Handbooks have all this and more, what happens when a player wants to buy something that isn't listed? Or maybe you decide you want to create a new item. How do you price these things? And in what world does the price of a good never fluctuate? Well, to answer these questions without disrupting the balance of the game, we should look into how D&D goods were priced in the first place. Back when D&D was first being developed, good old Gary Gygax was insistent on creating a believable world. To make the game more believable, he did what a lot of us do. He based it off of real life. In regards to currency, he based it heavily off 11th to 15th century England, with 1 gold being approximately the value of an English shilling from the era. To prove this point, let's look at some prices of goods in both period England and D&D. The charts on page 157 state that a cow is 10 GP. Accordingly, in the mid-14th century, a cow was worth 9 shillings and change. But a century or two earlier, they were 10 on the dot. A pound of saffron is 15 GP. In period England, 12 to 15 shillings per pound. In D&D, a pig and a pound of cloves were both worth 3 GP. Going back to period England, spices in general ranged from 1 to 3 shillings, and pigs went for between 2 and 3. So, just from this, it's pretty clear that at least in the trade goods department, the game is pretty well based on period England economics. Given the fact that trade goods form the backbone of every economy, one can be relatively comfortable in using period England as a baseline. But, while I will be leaving a link to the source for these prices in the description, nobody really wants to go looking for a period price for every new item they add, and combat gear can be a bit of a historical gray area when it comes to pricing. Luckily, there's a good way to quickly and easily determine what you price something at in your world. While there are certainly professions that paid less, and certainly professions that paid more, a laborer in period England made at most 40 shillings a year. That translates to roughly 40 gold pieces annually. Now that you know the commoner's salary, simply ask yourself, how long should some farmer or day laborer have to work to purchase that item? That should give you a decent base price on any item. Now, I mentioned price fluctuations earlier. D&D really doesn't have a system to account for this. However, I have a good rule of thumb that just makes everyone's life easy. Generally speaking, I treat the price in the books as sort of the normal price for something. But then I put on what I like to call the supply and demand filter. What I mean by this is if an item is massively abundant in an area of the world, I make it cheaper. If an item is harder to come by in a certain town or area, I make it more expensive. So while in a bustling commerce center in a city, things like swords, shields, clothing, and healing potions would be in relatively normal supply, a small town out in the middle of the mountains would probably have higher prices on all of those things, because most of that stuff would actually have to be transported to the town and would be brought there by traveling merchants. This would make the goods far more expensive. Conversely, if you're in a town that has a major blacksmithing outfit that turns out hundreds of suits of armor constantly, armor would probably be cheaper to get there. You don't have to handle your price fluctuations in this way. Hell, you don't have to have price fluctuations at all. But if you are someone like me who thinks it's ridiculous to assume that goods are going to cost the same in every single town, this method is a relatively quick and easy way to handle that. With that out of the way, we've answered both major questions that I posed. Both how do you price goods, and how do you handle price fluctuations. So now that we're done with the boring stuff, let's get to the fun part of this video. Let's take money in Dungeons & Dragons and give it a bit more spice and dimension. Something new to throw at your players. Something that's remained hidden in plain sight. And no, don't worry, I'm not talking about Electrum pieces. I'm talking about trade bar. Now I'm sure a lot of you out there are thinking, what in the hell is trade bar? And you would not be alone. That is precisely the very question I asked myself when I stumbled upon it in the DMG. On page 20 of the DMG, there's a few paragraphs about something called trade bar. The principle behind trade bar is similar to that of platinum pieces, which is that large quantities of coins are cumbersome and heavy, and are therefore inconvenient to transport long distances. But even if you were to convert all of your money into platinum pieces, that doesn't make the coins any more convenient. It just means you have fewer of them. What trade bar is are 2 to 5 pound bars of precious metals that each have a specified value. The DMG says they are commonly issued by governments, and that they are usually carried around by merchants and carts because they can be crated up easily. Now, I would be willing to bet that most of your parties are not merchants. They're probably adventurers who travel around solving people's problems. So why would your party need to worry about trade bar? Well, here's some fun ideas about how to incorporate trade bar into your campaign. The party has heard tell of a troll or an ogre that's been terrorizing the local town. One particularly wealthy merchant even had his caravan attacked and his carts were dragged away to the creature's lair. The party decide to go in search of the wealth that they are certain he had with him when he died. After defeating the monster and finding the cart, they open the chest expecting to see piles of gold coins, and instead find a bunch of trade bar. Another concept, the Crown puts out a bounty a particularly nasty group of bandits has set up along a major trade route. The king's reward is particularly generous, and the party decides they want to go seek out the stronghold or hideout of these bandits. They go and they clear out the ne'er-do-wells to collect their reward. After their victory, while they're searching the bodies and of course the camp itself, they find a crate half filled with trade bar from merchants that had been waylaid, and on the bodies of the bandits themselves are a bunch of bars which have been roughly hewn in half and distributed as payment. These are just two of nearly infinite different ways you can get this new economic tool into the hands of your players. But what makes trade bar different than any other coin? What makes it any different than Electrum or Platinum? Those two coins that nobody uses because they're just so much less common than gold or silver. Think about this. By and large, the only people who handle trade bar are merchants and vendors who deal in mass quantities of both product and money. That and governments. If a player has trade bar and they try to walk up to the average shopkeep, odds are good they're not going to know what the hell it is they're looking at. If anything, they'll probably just think you're trying to sell them the metal. This means the party will have to actively find a merchant who deals in high enough quantities to accept trade bar. And naturally, the trade bar that's been hewn in half, like in the aforementioned bandit scenario, would now just be metal and not have intrinsic value as declared by the Crown. This presents players with a new aspect to currency, where they have the ability to find treasure that they don't have to first convert into gold to spend. They don't have to go offload that gold statuette they found at the local pawnbroker or jewelry maker, and then go buy that sword they want. But they do have to specifically find a larger scale vendor who would accept trade bar. This presents a fresh new experience that can be fun, even if it is a little inconvenient. That inconvenience, however, brings me to a second fun new thing to throw into your games. Banks! Especially if you're throwing trade bar into your campaign, banks can make a seriously great addition to Dungeons & Dragons. The reason banks work so well in the modern world is because when you deposit your money, the computer updates your account total. This means that you can access your money pretty much anywhere. This presents an obvious obstacle as there are no computers in Dungeons & Dragons. This presents two primary options. Option 1. The bank simply functions as a way for players to safely and securely store money and/or gear in a specific town, as well as a place they can exchange trade bar for regular coin. Option 2, and this is my personal favorite, magical banks. This is the one that I use in my homebrew world of Amberhale. In Amberhale, I have a doll-like race of Fae called Zashiwara that are obsessed with money. Because the Fae kingdoms in my world are a major neutral power, this allows the Zashiwara to open an international bank. So anywhere in the world that the players can find a major city, they can simply walk into the bank and deposit money into their account. The Zashiwara then magically update the character's ledger, which reflects at all of the banks across the world. Now, you can do this on an international scale like I do, or you can do it on a country or kingdom level. You can really scale this idea to be as large or as small as you want. All you need is banks and a central magical ledger, and you're in business. What this does for players is it allows them to only keep the coins on them that they feel like risking at any given time. It also gives them a place to change out currencies they don't want to carry. Say they just came back from a quest where they obtained a lot of trade bar, or they got a crap ton of those pesky election pieces. They can take them to the bank and turn them into whatever currency is their personal favorite. Put it simply, it's convenient. And the bank itself can be really fun too. Say the players get fined by the local government for doing something dumb. A bank allows them to be straight up petty to the NPCs if they want. They can walk in and exchange all of their gold pieces for copper and then go pay their fine in copper. It also introduces the concept of bank heist to the world. Maybe you want to run an Ocean's 11 style bank robbery as a one-shot. Or maybe your party gets hired to stop a gang of bank robbers that's going around terrorizing the country. That's the really wonderful thing about Dungeons & Dragons. There's no limit to the different plot hooks and storylines that a DM can throw at the players. So adding simple things like trade bar or banks just expands the amount of different plots that you can run. It gives you something new and exciting to do, even if it only remains novel for a short time. But unfortunately, while I could talk about plot hooks and quests all day long, this really concludes today's episode of the DM Dumpstat. If you're a DM yourself, I hope you found this video helpful in regards to handling pricing, and maybe it gave you some new ideas for items and plot hooks. If you're a player and you think that any of the stuff covered today is something that you're interested in seeing at your own table, I encourage you to show it to your table and see if other people are on board. Regardless, thank you guys very much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Toss us a like and subscribe on your way out so that I can see you next time. Peace.